I had never imagined that my life would twist the way it did, but everything began the day I arrived at the Harris household. My name is Mira, and I worked as a live-in housemaid, responsible for cleaning, cooking, and helping with little Ella, their quiet 10-year-old daughter who barely spoke more than a few words a day. At first glance, the family looked perfect. Mrs. Lila Harris, elegant and always composed, and Mr. Daniel Harris, calm and polite, a man who carried himself with a kindness that almost seemed too gentle for this world. But behind the polished walls and warm smiles, something darker pulsed beneath the surface. Something I felt even on my first night when Ella slipped her small hand into mine and whispered, "Don't leave me alone at night." I didn't understand what she meant, but the way her eyes widened with fear made my heart tighten. I tried to ask her why, but she only shook her head and pressed her lips together the way children do when they fear punishment. I noticed Mrs. Lila watching us from across the room, her eyes sharp, reading every expression on her daughter's face. When Ella ran upstairs, Lila stepped closer to me and asked if her daughter had said anything unusual. I told her the truth, nothing at all, but she seemed unconvinced, as if she expected her daughter to confess something through me. Days passed, and I began noticing things that unsettled me. Ella would flinch whenever someone walked behind her. She avoided sudden sounds, avoided dark hallways, avoided the living room where her father often sat reading. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, I saw a faint bruise on her arm. When I asked her what happened, she stared at the wall and whispered, "I fell," but her voice trembled, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Mrs. Lila soon became overly protective, asking me repeatedly if I had seen any signs, any at all, of Daniel being harsh with Ella. I always told her no, because I truly hadn't. Daniel was soft-spoken, gentle, patient. But Lila insisted there was something wrong, something she felt as a mother, something she was certain he hid behind his calm face. Every day she observed him, followed him with her eyes, questioned him about the smallest interactions with their daughter. And slowly, painfully, she began to treat me not as a helper, but as an investigator living under her roof. Despite her suspicions, I couldn't see anything in Daniel that resembled violence. What I did see, however, was fear in Ella, real fear, and I didn't know who or what caused it. One night, long after everyone had gone to bed, I heard muffled crying from Ella's room. I rushed to her and found her curled beneath her blanket, shaking. She clung to me and begged me not to turn off the light. I held her until she slept, and by morning her mother was demanding to know why Ella had woken up afraid. Lila's voice cracked as she repeated the same question, was he in her room? But I couldn't lie. I hadn't seen Daniel anywhere near her. Everything changed one stormy evening when Ella collapsed in the hallway, her little body trembling with fever and exhaustion. I called for her parents, and the panic in their house exploded like a fire. We rushed her to the hospital, where the doctors said she was dehydrated, stressed, and clearly suffering from something deeper. Lila broke down, sobbing that she knew it, that she had been right all along, that her daughter had been living in fear of her own father. Daniel stood frozen, devastated, insisting he had never laid a hand on Ella. I watched the two of them fall apart in that cold hospital room, their marriage cracking under the weight of suspicion and pain. But the truth came quietly. When Ella finally woke up, her voice was barely a whisper. She reached for her mother and told her everything, not about Daniel, but about a teacher at school who had been harsh with her for weeks, a man who yelled, who grabbed her arm when she made mistakes, who terrified her every day. Ella had been too afraid to speak, too afraid she would be punished again. All the fear Lila had seen, she had directed at the wrong person. And when the truth settled in her mother's eyes, I saw something I will never forget. Remorse so deep it hollowed her from the inside. Lila apologized to her husband again and again, her voice trembling as she admitted how wrong she had been, how blinded she was by the idea that monsters only hide inside homes. Daniel forgave her, not because the suspicion had not hurt him, but because he understood that fear makes us imagine shadows where there are none. As for Ella, she slowly healed, and for the first time in weeks, she began to smile again. A small smile, fragile, but real. And I, standing in the middle of their restored home, realized that families break not only from violence, but from silence, doubt, and the weight of unspoken fears. I had witnessed the storm that nearly destroyed them. Yet it passed, leaving behind a family that held each other tighter, spoke with more honesty, and walked more gently around the fragile hearts of those they loved. I remained with them, not as a maid, but as someone who had seen their deepest fracture and their slow, painful healing. And every night when I checked on Ella, she slept peacefully, no longer afraid of shadows or footsteps or the dark that once consumed her.